Welcome back, and we are into session 6 of the Sri Lanka Economic Summit 2020. This session is on post-pandemic agriculture, opportunity in a crisis, an eminent panel, and I'd like to hand you over now to our moderator, Director of Vidul Lanka PLC, Rizvi Zahid.
Thank you very much. Very good morning. We are in for an exciting session. This is session 6 of the Sri Lanka Economic Summit 2020 with the theme Roadmap for Takeoff, Driving a People-Centric Economic Revival. This particular session on agriculture is with the theme Post-Pandemic Agriculture, Opportunity in a Crisis, and for which we have a very eminent lineup of speakers as well as panelists from across the industry covering most of the stakeholders. For the speakers, I'll very quickly give you an introduction before I make some opening comments. We have two eminent personalities. We have Dr. Nafees Meah, who is the representative of IRRI, International Rice Research Institute, has many years of experience covering the subject of agriculture. He will be presenting today online, being an overseas guest speaker. And then we have another very important personality, who is none other than the Secretary to the Ministry of Agriculture, Major General Sumedha Pereira, who's got very actively involved in the agriculture space in Sri Lanka. Then as panelists, we have again a very distinguished list of panelists. We have Mr. Vish Govindasamy, Group Managing Director of Sunchild Holdings PLC. Then there is Mrs. Jayanti Dharmasena, Executive Director of Haley's PLC. And Mr. Prashant Premakumar, Director and CEO of Agritmix, company involved in IT in the agri-space, and representing the aquaculture fisheries sector is Mr. Irfan Tasim, who founded Sri Lanka's pioneering farm fishing company and initiative in Trincomalee, Ocean Pick Private Limited. So let me, before we go on to the two main speakers, make a few very quick introductory remarks. As all of you are aware, Sri Lanka faced a huge situation in the agriculture space in the immediate post-COVID period and also during the post-COVID period in terms of disruptions to the agriculture value chains, from production to marketing to food availability. And this caused a lot of pandemonium, which came accompanied with the pandemic. Now, what Sri Lanka can do in going forward is converting this crisis into a distinct advantage for all of our people. And for this, I would like to very quickly cover a few points. One is that the theme, people-centric economic revival, is just apt for agriculture. As most of you know, and we all know, nearly 30% of the people of Sri Lanka are involved in agriculture. Now, there are issues with development. Now, people talk from the 1970s or 77 onwards of industrial-led economic development, but you can't have major shifts out of agriculture into manufacturing or services because factor and labor mobility is sometimes very difficult. So we have to live with this 30% of the people involved in agriculture. They have to be involved in agriculture. They have to get incomes from agriculture. And most importantly, they have to contribute towards economic development of the country. So how do we engage with this 30% of the people who can contribute to agriculture? Even before COVID, Sri Lanka was on the throes of takeoff, agricultural transformation, but due to a slew of unfortunate, I would call it fortuitous circumstances, policy and other interventions to incentivize agriculture, to change business models, was not taking off. There was a lot of hesitancy and inaction. But COVID presents an excellent opportunity for economic takeoff via agriculture. Literally, agriculture is low-hanging fruit. Why? Because the opportunities are unbounding. We have a huge agriculture tradition. We have a lot of people with knowledge of agriculture. We have a good resource base, although we have only 65,000 square kilometers of land. We have educated people, and we are geographically located in such a way that we can access global markets. what we have to do is to convert the resource we have in terms of the huge amount of fruits and crops and spices. Also fisheries and dairy, please don't forget, they're all included under the agriculture definition. And we can convert all of this into economic benefit for all the people in the country. There is scope for the private sector to invest. There is scope for farmers to get enhanced incomes. We simply have to make sure that this value addition takes place. We have to move up the value chain. So today's session is going to cover some of these important aspects, which will cover these critical areas. As you know, there are opportunities in the food security realm. His Excellency the President and Prime Minister referred to how the country requires the food security. Government has to provide for food security to people. There is a need for nutrition, and COVID offers opportunities to increase production. There's going to be huge demand for food more than anything else. There is a demand for raw material for industry and manufacturing that is coming from agri-processing industry. So yeah, and manufacturing also will take off if agriculture takes off. So there's a huge opportunity space outside. The immunity boosting foods that we can produce to cater to the needs for the post-COVID era is amazing. So agriculture, all of us who are involved in it have been in this space for a long time, and we are very passionate. And this team here today, the speakers and the panel, I'm sure will contribute to a healthy determination of the right strategy and the right approach to make Sri Lankans prosperous, to give incomes to farmers, and to make sure that all the players, whether investors in the private sector or attracting FDI from out as well into this space, will all be successful, and all the stakeholders will get good economic returns. So with that, let me now go on to the first speaker, which is Dr. Nafees Meah. Dr. Nafees Meah is, as I said earlier, the representative from the International Rice Research Institute. He's a very competent person, so I'd now like to hand over to Dr. Nafees Meah. Please be reminded that the speakers have got 15 minutes each. We are running through some tight times as well. So 15 minutes for each of the speakers. And then we have a full 60 minutes for the Q&A. For the people who are participating from outside, please use the Q&A button on your screens and post your questions there, and they will be taken up, and we will take them up as we go along. Also, if I can quickly remind the audience that there is a poll that's conducted by the Chamber of Commerce. Please take a few minutes to respond to that poll as well. So over to you, Nafees.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zahid, and thank you for the organisers for inviting me, giving me the honour of presenting at this very important summit. I don't have to remind everybody that this COVID crisis is the biggest public health crisis this century, and it's had massive social and economic effects throughout the world, both developed and developing countries. What I would like to do is share with you some of the work that we've been doing on the working on the impact of COVID-19 on the rice sector in the areas that we're working in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Africa, and importantly about building back better. So over the next 15 minutes or so, I would like to give you a short summary of what we've been doing and what we see are the opportunities, as Mr. Rizvi has said, in building back better. So the outline, what I'll do is give a little bit of background and objectives of the country level assessments that we've carried out, some key results and general patterns, the impact on the delivery of SDGs. As you all know, 2030 is the date where SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, are expected to be delivered, and what has been the consequence of the COVID-19 on the delivery of these Sustainable Development Goals, issues and challenges facing Sri Lanka specifically, and lastly but not least, opportunities for the future for building back better. So in terms of what we've been doing, we carried out a number of country level assessments, including in Sri Lanka. And the purpose of these was to understand the impact of COVID-19 on the rice sector and define potential entry points for IRRI to support countries dealing with these impacts. And these assessments were based on key informant interviews. And this was with government officials, private sector, including I may add the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, development partners, research institutes and universities. And what we looked at was the supply chain, across the supply chain, the input segment, the production segment, processing, marketing and consumption segment. And what was the impact initially, both initially and throughout the pandemic on these segments, on the rice sector in these countries, looking at impacts on food production, prices, consumer prices, market behavior, etc. So that's what we've done. Now, in terms of what we found, well, on the rice sector specifically, I think largely because of the timely action that was taken by governments across the region, despite the initial shock, was that there's been no significant impact on staples, including rice. And targets are likely to be met. Indeed, governments across South Asia in particular are more concerned with droughts, floods, and insect pests. There was some disruption on the provision of inputs, but these were relatively quickly resolved through prompt action by authorities. Labour was an issue because of movement restrictions, but in many countries, agriculture was defined as an essential service, and restriction of movements in this particular sector were removed. On consumption, there was some panic buying. We saw that across the region initially in stockpiling, but then again, it soon settled down. And in terms of policy measures, what was gratifying was that, unlike the situation that occurred in 2008, if people will recall, when there was a major crisis, there were temporary export bans, but these were soon lifted. However, we have seen that in a number of countries, there have been, as a result of the economic impact, budget cuts for agricultural ministries, which are a cause for concern. However, in respect of Sri Lanka, pre-pandemic issues and challenges remain. These are some of these issues are listed here. So there's been a stagnation in yield growth after many years of increasing yield growth. Over the last few years, there has been a stagnation. There's a high cost of production. We heard yesterday that per capita income is in Sri Lanka is about $4,000. So labor is particularly expensive in Sri Lanka. Variability of monsoon and climate change is having a major impact, and everyone will recall in 2017 there was a major impact from flooding and droughts in the same year. Farming is not attractive to youth, so there's an aging farming population. And many of the youth are going to urban areas, going to cities, and that migration is resulting in more and more women-headed households. However, the system is designed by men, for men, and there is an issue around women access to resources and control of those resources. Increasing biotic and abiotic stresses, particularly environmental degradation. So there's a need for better water and nutrient management. A big issue in Sri Lanka and across many developing countries is the small size of farm holdings, and that is holding up mechanization. There's a underdeveloped seed system, and despite the government's intention to have a market-led agriculture sector outside of plantation crops, there's no private sector investment engagement in rice-based agri-food systems, which accounts for about 50% of the agriculture in Sri Lanka. And lastly, but not least, there's a weakening national rice research and extension capacity. The number of qualified researchers at PhD and MSc level has been going down. So how do we build back better? That will be the basis of the rest of this short presentation. Well, in terms of achieving SDGs in South Asia, we can say, unfortunately, that this is going to be a big challenge. There's this issue about rising populations, gender, and economic inequality, land degradation mentioned, agriculture policies that have neglected externalities on nutrition and natural resources. And one of the major consequences of COVID-19 pandemic is the loss of income. Poor will be badly affected and have been badly affected in all regions in the global south. Of course, the current food system in South Asia is failing. There's uncontrovertible evidence to that. So, for example, 45% of children under 5 years old in several Indian states are stunted. 21% of children 5 in Bangladesh are vitamin A deficient. In Sri Lanka, 25% of women in reproductive age are anemic. And diabetes is a growing problem in South Asia, and in Sri Lanka, it's around 9% in the adult population and increasing year on year. Now, some of you will be aware of the EAT Lancet Commission report, which was published last year. And it had a number of key points, which has been which has caused the global community to really ponder and consider what needs to be done. So one of the points it made was 690 million people have insufficient food and many consume healthy diets. So we have this issue of the triple burden. The agriculture system currently accounts for about a quarter of the agriculture forestry system currently accounts for a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions. And as the greenhouse gas emissions from other sectors, notably the energy sector and the transport sector, are decreased, then the proportion from the agriculture sector will increase unless something else is done. So the planetary boundaries are being exceeded by the agriculture sector, and something needs to be done in that sector. So they said that there's an urgent call for a food system transformation to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the commitments made under the Paris Agreement. So what will a food system transformation require? Well, 4 things I've pointed out here. One, you need to enable access to nutritious food for all to underpin healthy populations, guaranteeing sustainable food production, processing, and trade and retailing, mitigation and adapting to climate change. And given that the vast majority of food in South Asia and in many parts of the global South are produced by smallholder farmers, then there's a need to improve livelihoods and resilience of farming and rural communities, and that applies to Sri Lanka as other places. So one quick win might be biofortification of staples to address the issue of undernutrition. So linking nutrition more explicitly with agriculture and bridging this gap with micronutrients. And one of the things that we've been doing, and a number of countries doing, is developing high iron and zinc rice varieties, given that rice is a staple food in Sri Lanka and South Asia, and will continue to be so in the future. So here are two examples of the varieties that we have developed. In addition to that, to address the issue of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, which is a growing problem, we are developing low GI rice, and there are a number of varieties that exist in our gene bank, which are low GI. And one of the things that we have been doing is identifying the genetic basis of low GI and backcrossing the varieties that have low GI with more major rice varieties. But that's on the supply side. On the demand side, one of the things that governments need to do is increase awareness of the importance of micronutrients in the diets and the benefits of biofortified rice, particularly to the health of children. Let me move on now to one of the things that I believe is going to be absolutely critical for the future, and that is creating sustainable food value chains in the rice sector. And by that, I mean, in terms of sustainability, both economic, social, and environmental sustainability. And that would be through the means of appropriate cropping and mixed livestock systems that are tailored for specific regions and agroecologies. And one of the objectives of value chain enhancement should be, as a clear goal, increasing the remuneration to farmers and better quality and safety of food products to consumers. So there's a lot of work being done to design these systems. We have been working on rice-based agri-food systems, rice-fish systems, rice livestock systems, mixed with vegetables, other staples, etc., and also energy, using rice straw as an energy source. One of the things that we have observed is a bottom-up adoption of e-agriculture, and I think this is something that much needs to be encouraged. Indeed, one of the things that we can do is digitize the agricultural value chain across the value chain, and that will particularly help smallholder farmers in addressing the issue of information asymmetry that they have. So it will make available to farmers climate services, weather services, information on prices, markets, etc. And that is something that, as I say, has been organically being developed in a number of countries we've seen, and that is something that we could systematize going forward. Another area where it would be important to develop is scale-up mechanized agriculture, precision farming, the use of drones, laser land leveling, DSR. DSR is used extensively in Sri Lanka itself, but again, in a number of countries, DSR is an opportunity for enhancing and developing mechanized farming. And solar bubble dryers I've mentioned here for drying, which is an issue in Sri Lanka. And of course, a well-functioning seed system. One of the issues in Sri Lanka is developing a seed system to enable that rice varieties that meet consumer needs. So developing varieties that have clear product profiles that meets the need of all the people in the rice value chain. So, in terms of what IRRI has been doing, we have been over the last few years talking to the government of Sri Lanka to develop what we call a resilient rice agri-food system for South Asia initiative. And that, as a result of that, we've developed a 5-year work plan with the government of Sri Lanka, which we are looking to support. Now, this is tailored to meet the needs of Sri Lanka. We've had a number of meetings, workshops, and developed a specific set of interventions that address the rice-based agri-food system in Sri Lanka. And these are based on a number of modules. So looking at trying to harness genetic diversity, climate resilient rice systems, accelerating innovation, and importantly, empowering women farmers for improved income and health. And of course, capacity development and technology transfer. Clearly, really important, very important issues for the future. So the impact that we are seeking is to transform the rice-based agri-food system by enhancing the capacity of individuals and solutions. And that is designed to enable Sri Lanka to achieve its goals in food and nutrition security and sustainable farming. Absolutely major and important goals going forward. So in summary, what we need to do and the important aspects that need to be addressed are develop and deploy nutrition-rich rice varieties, build climate resilient and sustainable rice-based agri-food systems, scale out the agriculture. One of the things that we need to focus on is better understand the indirect impact of the COVID pandemic on the diets of vulnerable groups. As I said, because of the economic impact in Sri Lanka, in particular the impact of the tourist industry sector and the reduction in the amount of remittances means that incomes will go down in the short term. And what will be the impact on diets is something that we need to understand better. Capacity building in Sri Lankan agriculture and extension agencies, both public and private, is key. We have an opportunity for South-South learning. The exercise that we've done highlighted a number of areas where governments, public authorities and the private sector have stepped up to the plate. What can we learn from each other is something that we should focus on. And work better with development partners and national systems to build back better. So with that, I'll conclude my brief presentation. Thank you, Mr. Zahid.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nafees. That was a very exhaustive expose on the sector, particularly with focus on paddy. And with your experience, you really have brought some useful lessons for Sri Lanka as well, from the rice value chain to the urgent call for food systems transformation that will cover all of our smallholders, climate change, sustainable, guaranteeing food systems, etc., as well as creating sustainable food value chains. And that's something that's very important, particularly in relation to nutritional rice, about the breeding programs and the support that IRRI can give to Sri Lanka, and the work already that IRRI is doing with the government of Sri Lanka as well. You also covered very appropriately the rice-based agri-food systems, and we need that innovation where we have food systems, where we have rice together with fish production, like what's happened in Bangladesh, and that can enhance farmer incomes while providing a balanced diet as well to the people of Sri Lanka. And importantly, about the scale appropriate mechanisms, high-tech agriculture. Sri Lanka is getting a flavor of it, supported by digitization as well. We don't yet see a lot of takeoff in terms of precision agriculture, but there are some examples already in Sri Lanka which can be replicated. So thank you very much, Dr. Nafees. Very interesting. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions during the Q&A.